All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. Now, we just saw Deontay Wilder fight Tyson Fury last night in one of the most epic heavyweight title fights of all time, if not the greatest heavyweight title fight of all time. I would actually, before I even get into all this, because we're going to talk about Francis Ngannou, his plans, and how they play into what happened last night, I would challenge anybody to throw out a boxing match that was a heavyweight title fight that was better than the one that we watched last night. 5 knockdowns, okay? 5 knockdowns. Just use that as an objective metric to try to find a comparable heavyweight title fight that you could put up against that, because I couldn't think of any of them. And look, man, the bottom line is it's not that often that you get an incredible heavyweight title fight, especially after the reign of Klitschko and these guys. I mean, that fight was insane. It was insanely good. And if anybody has anything other than respect for either of those guys, then you're crazy. I mean, Deontay Wilder is the man, dude. And usually a guy gets, in a rematch, he gets knocked out again. You don't generally think, man, I would love to watch that guy fight again. But right now, I would love to watch Deontay Wilder fight again. I mean, I'm serious. I would be just as excited to watch Deontay Wilder fight anybody as I would be to watch Tyson Fury. Maybe a close second. But the reason we're doing this video is because Francis Ngannou has a fight on the books with Ciryl Gane. And unless people know things that I don't, which is impossible, Francis is going to be in a situation where he will have the freedom to box if he wants to in the near term. You basically have 2 options. I'm not going to dive into the weeds of the details, but the bottom line is if Francis and his team decide they want to fight, if they want to box, if they want to leave UFC and box or co-promote with UFC and box, they will have the option to do that. Plain and simple. And not in an amount of time that is so outlandish that you couldn't start planning around it. And so I know for a fact that is a very, very heavy priority for them, because that was Francis's dream. It's not a knock on the UFC. It's not a knock on mixed martial arts. When Francis was in a sand mine in Cameroon and he had a dream that he was going to chase, that he's going to go through all the stuff that he went through to get over to Europe and then come to the States and all that, the vision that he had was not being the UFC champion. It was being the heavyweight champion in boxing. That's what his vision was. Now, I'm sure that his priorities changed a little bit, but that was always his dream. And so I know that is something that he's very, very serious about achieving. And so, I don't know how closely any of you guys have followed my channel, but I've talked a lot about what's going on in that contract negotiation, and the boxing thing is a huge, huge part of it. And so basically, you look at last night, and it's like, if you were going to map out Francis's career. Now, I will say this. I really do hope. I hope he re-signs with the UFC. And I hope the UFC co-promotes. Or, I want him to be the UFC champion, and I want him to go fight in boxing. It's not like there are a bunch of UFC champions that have really interesting boxing matches in front of them. Like the Conor McGregor one with Floyd, that was interesting. That was really interesting, and it was super fun because you knew they were just going to make a huge spectacle of it, and it ended up being an amazing fight. I loved that entire thing. But if you think of any other guys from the UFC, it's like, oh, we're going to go box. It's like, all right. Except Francis. If Francis goes and fights Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury, that is a barn burner that I want to see. Now, I'm not going to sit here and predict what I think will happen in those fights. But in terms of what I think would make the most sense in terms of business, that I can definitely do. So let's say that we're talking inside of 12 months and Francis is going to announce a boxing match against one of those guys. I think that the one that would sell the most is probably against Tyson Fury. I think that fight is by far the most problematic for Francis. But just for the same reason as what we saw last night. Deontay Wilder is kind of the same puzzle as Francis, right? He's not going to be, Francis is not going to be a much more technical boxer than Deontay Wilder. He probably does hit a little bit harder than Deontay, but nonetheless, Tyson Fury got hit with a titanic shot from Deontay, and he took it, he got back up and kept boxing. Tyson is a technical, he's an incredibly strong technical boxer with a lot of power also. I think that Anthony Joshua or Deontay Wilder are incredibly exciting fights for Francis that would sell a lot of pay-per-views. And if you were really going to map his career out sequentially, the best case I would say is you have him fight Deontay Wilder first, And if he beats Deontay, then he fights Tyson Fury. Can you imagine how many pay-per-views that second one would sell? First of all, the first one would sell a bunch. But can you imagine if Francis is able to win against either Anthony Joshua or Deontay Wilder, and then he fights Tyson Fury? It would be, oh my God, it would be insane. But I think both Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, coming off losses, they are prime for, they need a big fight. I would imagine they're probably going to fight each other, actually, since they're both coming off losses. But nonetheless, like, Francis, throws a whole new thing into that heavyweight division, because look, like, right now you got Anthony Joshua, you got Deontay Wilder, and you got Tyson Fury. Now, Tyson Fury's probably going to sell pay-per-views no matter who he fights, but not as many as if he fights either of those two guys. And with those two guys, what kind of numbers did the Anthony Joshua fight do, right? Like, what do you think Deontay Wilder would do? Deontay Wilder would do pretty good if he fought someone else, but like, there just aren't any other well-known heavyweights that the masses, just mass public would be excited about. But you throw Francis in there and you throw the machine of the UFC behind there, dude, that'll sell some pay-per-views. That'll be an enormous event. And, look, like I said, I would love to see him re-sign with the UFC, have a super long title reign with the UFC, and then also go fight in boxing, kind of like how Conor did, but get a more kind of concrete schedule, so he can't just go do that and then sit out for 18 months like Conor did. But I would say there is a very high likelihood that you get to see Francis fight one of those guys in the next 18 months. I would say that is an incredibly high probability of happening. So, of course, UFC could throw a bunch of money at Francis and maybe that would work. But you also have the John Jones fight that would be really meaningful for Francis. There's a lot of moving parts here, but I do know that, like I said, they would love to go box, man. They would love to go box, and they will have the option to do that if they want. So anyway, we'll see what happens. If you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell.